Being involved in radio, sometimes you get asked questions about antennas and how do I buy one from where and stuff like this. How do I make one? Making one seems to be a thing of the past now, so I thought I'd just make a little vid for a chap that asked me last night, particularly, give me something to do and help him out. Bit of cardboard there, making a little hole in it and what have you, as I stab my thing in, so that's perfect. Little bosh and job's done. So 6.655 about. Okay, so that's the measurement for an antenna we're going to look at today. And rules using, I better put my teeth in, start whistling a bit, might help a bit, you know. And the coax length there, there's GB3 Delta Sierra going off in the background, noises from the shack. Okay, so we got it marked off. Just pop along there, put his knife in, and a little bit of a push. Job's a good one. Okay, not very big, is it? Oh, dearie me, bit of plastic. And now we need another one, same. So pop it in, get it to the line, make sure we're safe. Not going to chop your fingers off. And again, little push with the knife. Okay, so basically we only need the center core of this thing. It's quite slim, so I'm going to peel that back so I can make a joint at this end. Okay, so I stripped down the coax and I've bared one end off, as you can see there. I'm going to do the same with the other one, and that's all we need to start with. That's the beginning of a basic antenna for 70 centimeters that will also work for monitoring, listening purposes on PMR446. Okay, so we've got both ends now bared off, and I always twist the wires because I can get the solder onto them as I'm working better, and it tends to be a bit of a neater job. It doesn't look a lot like this, and if you've never built an antenna, you probably think, what the bloody hell's he doing? Well, we'll show you what it does in a little while. I'm probably going to do an SWR test on this as well, and I'll video that when I do it. This is going to be a cheap and cheerful antenna. So basically, looking for a chocolate block connector, and if you've not come across these, if you're relatively new to the hobby, a little hole at this side that goes all the way through for connecting wires and stuff like that. Probably come across these in projects if you've done little projects before. That's what we're going to be using. And the coax, at the moment this is just basic RG58 coax. For the length of the feed, it's not going to make a lot of difference, and if you're only listing on PMR446, it's not going to make any difference at all, really. You're not going to lose that much on a short antenna. By short antenna, I meant short antenna feed, in other words, so the coax length won't be that long.
No.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, we're using this chocolate block connector and some coax. What we need to do is figure out, get it in there, but we need some braid in one side and the center core in the other. So I'm going to split that now and sort that out. Using a Stanley knife, I've taken that back about an inch on the outer core there. I've taken the plastic off, and we're going to roll that back, and then I'm going to fold that and twist it together. That's the braid that's been folded back and twisted to a little bit off the side there at a kind of 90-degree angle. Don't worry about that for now, it will change slightly. When you've bared that off, this is kind of what you're going to end up with. So looks a bit boring at the moment, doesn't it, really? 2 bits of wire, which is what all antennas are based on. They're based on a dipole, which is basically what we're building here. This is just for the 70 centimeter band, so it's quite short. What I've done now, just bent the wire that we're going to solder almost to the width of the chocolate block that we're going to pop it in eventually. So I'm just going to pop the solder on now. I might not film that, it depends. I've only got one pair of hands, and unfortunately they're going to be using a soldering iron. If you're relatively new to the hobby, you might have not heard of Helping Hands. Now, this is a very old one. There's bits missing off it. It came from a friend of mine who passed away many years ago, and in the radio world, you cherish that bit of kit because it was passed on to you as a present or a gift from them, you know. And something simple as that, holding a piece of coax with one pair of hands and not much else, sometimes you can struggle with that. So try not to do that. And you don't want your fingers burning, and you obviously want to try and get a decent clean solder joint if possible for what we're going to do on this antenna. You're relatively new to the hobby, you've probably not made an antenna before, you've probably not even done a soldering joint. Unfortunately, they don't do the practicals at the clubs anymore now, they do the exam online. And there are things that you miss and you don't learn because of that. You don't get to meet people, mix with people that know the hobby like some of us in the older generation did. That was quite important, the social aspect of it and the sharing of knowledge. So basically what we've done here, we've got a joint and we call this tinning. And what that does, it puts a bit of solder onto the wire. So that then bonds that together and you've got something you can work with if you wanted to solder to something else. Now, all we're going to do with this is put it into the chocolate block. But it's worth doing that as they're getting a good connection. It will squash a little bit with the screw thread in there, but that's the idea. Okay, so we've popped that in there and screwed it down quite tight. Made sure it's not going to wiggle about too much. You can tape this as well if you really want. Now, some people have never made an antenna. They've just bought them when they've joined the hobby. Part of making antennas is part of the hobby, basically. You learn about the lengths of wire, and that means they equate then to the band. So generally, as a rule of thumb, the longer the wire, the lower the frequency. The shorter the wire, the higher the frequency. That's why we're only working with short bits of wire on 70 centimeters. And obviously 2 meters a little bit longer. You go a little bit higher up, the antenna is going to get shorter. And obviously that's where beams and such like come in. You can make beams out of the electrical tape like I've got here. Cut them to the size and fit them up once you understand a little bit of basic antenna theory. I'm working with basic bits of wire, very short bits of wire, as you can see. I've cut out the edge of the chocolate block where the wire is going to run once I've connected it into the chocolate block itself. I've also tinned the antennas where I've bent them, where they're going to go into the chocolate block connector. That helps to put a kind of right angle on it because I bent the wire and then put it in place by fixing a bit of solder on it. It will still bend, obviously, because it's not soldered inside the plastic cable. It feels a lot longer than it is with watching this video, but I'm just trying to do a little bit at a time and breaking it down as I bake it and then showing it. So obviously there we've got the basic antenna, which is basically a dipole, which is what all antennas are based upon. And when they show you this great big fantastic, oh, it does this, it does that, it does the other, but it's still based against the dipole, how they work it out and what have you. I've got here is just a basic fishing pole type support. They were a ground plane and you're supposed to put wire inside them and then screw them to the antenna. And what I'm going to do with that is that chocolate block is going to sit in the end of that. I'm going to tape the coax down that stem so it holds the antenna in place. Okay, one of the first lessons that you need to learn as a radio guy, when you're using an SO239 or rather a PL259, the SO239 is what it plugs into. Basically, when you're doing your coax, make sure you put it on the coax. Many a laugh has been had at each other over the years for forgetting to put that thing on because you can't screw it into the back of your radio afterwards. What I usually do is I tie a little knot in the coax. Don't go too far then if you've got a length of coax, and then you can do your PL259 connection. And for some, it's teaching me granny to suck eggs, but basically one of the things to do when you're doing the coax plug, measure it so that the center core is level or just a little bit beyond the pin of the coax. I do that generally by just holding them outside of each other, marking it with my thumbnail or hold it there, then I cut it with a Stanley knife. When you do cut it, be very, very careful. Don't go too deep, basically. I'm the grey guy, by the way. PJ thinks that these videos are a little bit boring when we're doing stuff like this, but I think you do need a technical side, but we do have a laugh besides this. Should sit in the clubhouse some nights and listen to the raucous that goes on there. But basically, and there's somebody calling on the radio there. G3ZHI. There you go, another station. So that's the first part of your coax. So once we've got that stripped off, twist the wire together, and I run it down the side of the cable like so. Sometimes solder that very, very thinly, and obviously that helps to form a connection when you screw that onto the PL259 plug. So there is the fusion in the background there, going away on the reflector or over the link over in Sutton in Ashfield. So now you can see this is going to slide onto here. If you've never done one before, it'll be new to you. If you have, you'll say, that weren't a very good way of doing it, but there's always a way to do it. You'll get it on there anyway. I've now bared that back. Similar again with cutting the black outer core. Cut this very carefully and Don't watch your fingers if you're using a Stanley knife. I tend to put my fingers at the back of it and just scour it, and then go in a little bit more until I can remove it by hand. Okay, we're placing this on here now. Do make sure that that centre core goes actually into the pin. Sometimes it can get caught in the middle if you're not so lucky. It gets a bit bent, then you end up having to take this thing off again. Screw them on. Some are compression these days. I don't have any, so we're using what I've got, and I prefer this anyway. Just knock the S down while that's going ahead. And obviously now if you come in closer with the camera, you can see that now has got the coax centre core through the end of the plug, and that is now nipped up nicely at the back. You can cut that off. I generally tape it because if I need to remove it, I've got something to hold when I'm unscrewing the thing when I've desoldered. Shake it a bit from the problem with my hands, but try and get a nice little solder on there. It's normally a little bit neater, but I'm struggling a little bit trying to work with this. Okay, so now we've got a nice little blob of solder in there. Just neaten it up a little bit. And here we have the completed plug basically. Yep, long and boring video, but we got somewhere. We did something that is not done in clubs anymore, sadly. You have to find somebody that knows what they're doing. And I don't consider myself an expert. I'm just another amateur that's trying to learn the ropes and enjoy the hobby. But that is your finished product on the end of the coax there. Okay, just going to do the SWR test. So first of all, I'm going to calibrate and check that. So we're trying to calibrate now. M0 Golf Echo Tango. Test purposes. M0 Golf Echo Tango, test purposes. I'm going to switch it back down now to the reference. M0 Golf Echo Tango, test purposes. Again, release it. And again, M0 Golf Echo Tango, test purposes. So pretty much a dead needle on that antenna that I built. And just testing it now. And again. Just going to do this calibration yet again. Also would work on there if needed. Just going to test that SWR on that antenna we just made, and then we'll try it on the local repeater. So M0 Golf Echo Tango, just checking access, programming the radio and checking SWR. And one more time. Thank you very much. M0 Golf Echo Tango, no movement in the needle.